Film Talk number 2 with the Judd brothers.
Gear, the thing we all love, but is it helping us?
Exactly right. Is it helping us? I think one of the biggest traps that many of us run into at various times is gear lust.
Maybe even all of us. Absolutely. Personal experience, and then people that friends, people I work with all the time. And you end up spending hours and hours clicking around through B&H, which has awesome stuff. But I think it's important to do what you can with what you have and not sit around thinking about, oh, if I only had this, then I could do what I want. And I think we all fall into that trap.
We do. And it takes different forms. I think sometimes where I find myself falling in is I am on a shoot and something happens, a problem arises, and then afterwards I kind of stew over it for a little while, and I think I can solve that problem with XYZ gear.
Yep.
What's the secret for kind of pulling yourself out of that and making sure that walking the line and deciding, okay, yeah, it makes sense to invest in such and such, or maybe I just need to cool off for a while and think it through, and maybe I just need to be careful next time.
Right. Well, I mean, I think one thing is, it's like I've tried to, for the most part, ask myself the question, is this going to make me money? Is this an investment, or is this a cool gadget? And I was very careful as I was upgrading from DSLR shooting to a cinema camera to have enough work with my DSLR to fund getting into a bigger camera. If it's a hobby, it's a different thing. You have to think about disposable income, an angry spouse, any number of things. Are you going to be able to pay rent? And it's seriously, it's like that. I think some of us have been like, okay, well, I can afford this, and then I'll work out how to pay my phone bill later. And up to like, well, are you putting money into savings? And then back to just, is this gear going to make you money? Just being responsible with it. It's an addiction.
Some people, and actually, I actually have had this thought just recently where I get really frustrated. Now, moving up into a cinema camera, for example, there is a massive learning curve. If you're going to shoot, well, there are a couple things going on. Number one, those cameras are capable of capturing a much wider dynamic range, and then you're still going to be finishing for Rec 709 or for web or whatever, where the dynamic range is far more compressed, so you're going to have to kind of make decisions, creative decisions about how to crush that down. Also, most of them are shooting with log profiles, so you have a different gamma curve, and you're having to learn how to work with all that.
Right.
And there's a massive learning curve, and I am not by any means, I think, competent with that yet. I think what comes along with that is learning how to expose correctly, which is an entirely new thing once you start working with, again, log gammas. And so I think for me, when I made the decision to buy the Ursa Mini Pro, for example, I thought, well, the nice thing about the Ursa Mini Pro is that I'll have the option of, for the beauty shots where I really want to get in and I want to make this beautiful shot, capture dynamic range that I can't capture with my DSLR or my Panasonic GH4, 5, whatever. I'm going to have to learn how to use it, but I keep finding myself shooting on the film profile and sometimes making a bunch of mistakes. And in a lot of ways, I guess I'm learning from it, but I also feel like it's holding me back as well. You ever run into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's with it's with any piece of gear when it's new. I've made the mistake before of brand new piece of gear, run out to the first gig, and I have something cooler looking than what I had before, and then I get back to the studio to start cutting it up, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I should have probably learned some of this stuff. And one of the big things for me, though, was, again, in a similar situation when I upgraded to the Ursa Mini Pro, which to me is one of the easiest cinema cameras I've ever worked on. It's really easy, but there are some little quirks you got to know as far as like transforming your color in post if you're shooting a film log. But what I found was that wasn't the problem as much as soon as I had it and I had the basics to, actually shoot, it was, okay, well, I want to get 2 more of these batteries, and I want to get some CFast cards, or do I want the SSD recorder? And so my B&H wish list was like $15,000. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I was excited about this camera because it was fairly inexpensive. And then during that time, my own personal creative output, not just like the paid work that I was doing, I'm always working on my own projects for my own sake, for my own fun, for my own creativity. I didn't do hardly anything then because I was just wasting so much time clicking around looking for what I need. And is like coming from more of the creative side, I think it kills creativity if you suddenly have this pile of gear and you don't know what to do with it. You just waste a lot of time teching.
Exactly. Yeah. And even when you do, when it does make sense to make a capital investment like that for, whatever it may be, I think timing is important too, because you need to be able to time it so that you can actually spend a fair amount of time testing with it and learning it and getting to understand how to make the most of it.
Absolutely. So the moral of the story is everyone go to your to your B&H wish list and start deleting things, and then start putting them on one at a time. And I actually, that sounds funny, but I actually did that. I think it had built up to this one point, and I was like, you know what? I'm already doing paid gigs with this. What would either bring in more business or make the professional work that I'm doing better? And I cut it down by about a third.
Interesting.
And that was big. It was almost like a relief. Like I wasn't putting pressure on myself that I have to have this before I'm a real boy, like that kind of Pinocchio thing. If I just have this lens or this thing, then I'll be a real shooter.
Yep. And I think we've talked a lot about cameras here today. I think, though, what also is an interesting topic that I've kind of come to recognize over time is that while we kind of obsess and focus on cameras and lenses and things of that nature, there is something to be said for maintaining a fairly modest camera and investing in lighting and investing in audio gear if you're a solo shooter. Because it doesn't matter what camera you have. If you can light, you can make pretty good imagery on a $500 camera, no problem.
Absolutely. I'm on an iPhone even. I mean, it's just a matter of learning the craft. And that's the thing I think we fall into is we think the gear is going to be the end-all be-all solution. You can buy a gimbal, but then you got to learn how to walk. Like you're going to get wag even with a great gimbal. And there's so many alternative ways to do things, and learn to have steadier hands,
Any other thoughts on gear before we wrap it up today?
Challenge yourself to make something great on the gear you have before you go out and purchase something new.
I would say also reprioritize. So instead of, even if you're shooting for just as a hobby, as a passion, I would say that you probably should split up your budget. So figure out how much money you can spend. And I would say that probably at least 50% of that budget needs to go to things that you wouldn't necessarily normally think to buy first. I think you should go to lighting. I think you should go to audio gear. I think you should go to the support things that you're going to need. You're going to need a tripod at some point. If you don't have a good tripod, or you're fighting with it all the time, or it's tipping over or something stupid, you need to invest in a decent tripod. Those kind of things really are going to make more of a difference in getting creative output and keeping you focused on what drew you to filmmaking in the first place.
Absolutely.
All right, bro. High five. Talk to you again next week.
See ya.